I just finished part two, The Two Towers of Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. This one's split in two books, or into two parts. If we remember from the end of Fellowship of the Ring, we had Frodo and Sam going across the Anduin to the east side of the river and breaking away from the Fellowship. And that's where this one picks up. It's split into two parts. The first part follows the remainder of the Fellowship, and then the second half of the book follows Frodo and Sam. And of course, it's called The Two Towers because each of our two POVs are two sort of storylines. They're each going to one of these two towers. The remainder of the Fellowship on the west side of the river are going to Orthanc in Isengard, and Frodo and Sam are going to Minas Morgul in Ithilien. Those are our two towers. The Tower of the Moon, Minas Ithil, now Minas Morgul, and the Tower of Saruman, Orthanc in Isengard. So the book starts with the west side of the river. Frodo and Sam have left, but the orcs are attacking, and they manage to capture Merry and Pippin. Boromir tries to defend them, but Boromir is slain by them in the end. So he kind of redeems himself from what he did in the last book, where he tried to take the ring from Frodo, but he is tragically killed here. Now, in the film, it's a much cooler scene, and I think it happens in the first film, actually. But I do feel like the books, certainly this book, it does feel a bit drier or not as emotional as the films. But that could just be me, because I adore this scene in the films, but I don't even think we actually see this scene in the book. It's just sort of Aragorn comes across Boromir and he's slain. He's full of arrows. So Merry and Pippin are carted away by the orcs because they have orders from Saruman to capture the halflings, the hobbits, because one of them has this ring. So they're being taken to Orthanc, to Isengard. They're taking the hobbits to Isengard, but of course they have the wrong hobbits. So Gimli, Aragorn, and Legolas, they don't really know what to do. Everything's falling apart, but they decide that they're not going to abandon Merry and Pippin. And so they chase after them and run and hunt these orcs for miles. Now, in the movies, again, I keep comparing the films to the books, but in the movies, they seem to run day and night nonstop. In the books, they do take enough rests, but that means that they never actually catch up with them. They do run into Éomer and some riders of Rohan. So the Rohirrim are a group of people sort of based on the Anglo-Saxons. I picture them as being very Anglo-Saxon. Now, this could just be the films, but to me, the Rohirrim are Anglo-Saxons, and the men of Gondor are sort of the Normans. The Rohirrim, they love horses. They're led by this King Theoden. But anyways, for now, Éomer's just like, who are you guys? What are you doing here? Because he runs into Aragorn and company, and they tell their tale and say, yes, we killed those orcs. We didn't find any halflings. If you want to go search the pile of bodies, you can. So despairing, the three go and find the pile of corpses. And then we have a sequence where it jumps to Merry and Pippin's perspective. The one thing I gotta say about Tolkien, he's really, really good at pacing and sort of ordering things, giving us POVs in certain order. So it's not all chronological. We kind of jump back and forth, but it gives so much suspense, and you don't really know what's gonna happen next. Like, it seems like, oh, Merry and Pippin are dead. But then we jump back to, well, let's find out what really happened to them. And we follow them traveling with the orcs, and the orcs taking them, and how the orcs are fighting. Because some of the orcs are from Isengard, some are from Moria in the north, some are from Mordor. And so these three different groups are not getting along, and there's infighting, and eventually there's the attack by the Rohirrim. But Merry and Pippin manage to escape and flee into Fangorn Forest, this ancient forest that's kind of creepy, and there's something else going on there, and it's very dangerous. They escape into that forest. Then we're introduced to Treebeard, whose real name is actually Fangorn, or I guess Fangorn means Treebeard. But he's sort of the one that is master of the forest in a way. At least the forest is named after him. They run into Treebeard. So Treebeard is an Ents, and Ents are, in the films, they're shown as like anthropomorphic trees, but in the books it makes it feel like they are tree-like, but they're definitely not trees. They are sort of creatures. They're described as being kind of troll-like, and it's sort of said that the trolls of the enemy are Ents that have been sort of twisted and tormented, much like orcs are elves. So they hang out with Treebeard. It's really cool. He calls an Ent moot, where all the Ents get together and decide what are they going to do about Isengard and Saruman, who's been burning their forest and betraying them. And in the end, they decide, yes, we're going to go to war. The Ents are going to go to war with Isengard, though they are going to their doom, or something to that effect. I think it's really, really cool that, again, I'm praising the films, but the films will quote the book word for word, line for line. So many of the like fantastic quotes from the film are literal transcriptions of the book. And like, I don't know how many adaptations that do that, take word for word from their source material. Anyway, we then jump back to Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas. So now that the reader knows that Merry and Pippin survived, they continue on into Fangorn, thinking maybe the hobbits have escaped into Fangorn, and that's when they come across this white wizard. And it's sort of been hinted that Saruman's been wandering around, the white wizard, this old man. And so they come across an old man dressed in white, and they think it's Saruman, but of course it's revealed to be Gandalf, and he has come back from the dead. He tells them of how he fought the Balrog, and they fell so far down into the very depths of the earth, and it's really neat. They describe how the center, or not the center, but sort of the deep in the earth, there's these massive cyclopean holes that sort of go everywhere, and there's some sort of like eldritch horrors that live down there. I thought that was really, really cool. But then how they fought all the way back to the top of the mountain, and he killed the Balrog, but then was himself sort of slain, but has come back for the final fight at the turn of the tide to fight Sauron. And Gandalf at this point is very much a sort of the good to Sauron's evil. He's not as powerful as Sauron, but he is extremely, extremely powerful. I think in the films he's not portrayed as powerful as he is in the books. But anyway, so they've found Gandalf and they're thrilled. So now they're going to ride to Edoras, the capital of Rohan, where the King Thengol resides. Try to convince him, hey, we need to go to war with Isengard, or Isengard's going to attack. So they get there, but the king is sort of under the spell of Saruman. He has a counselor, Grima, who they call Wormtongue, because he's like this sniveling man that's trying to take power away from Theoden, or he's working for Saruman. They don't know that yet, but he's like taking the king's sword away, and the king's like really slumped over and old and decrepit, and Gandalf sort of reveals his power and banishes Grima and revitalizes Theoden King, and Theoden sort of takes his sword and feels his strength once more and sort of stands tall once again. He's still an old man, but he's got a last bit of life in him, and so he's immediately like, yeah, we gotta go to war. Pack everyone up. We're heading to Isengard. We're going to take the fight to him. But he needs to have someone stay behind to help the women and children, and they're going to flee into Dunharrow, this sort of safe haven. And he's trying to find a man to do it, and he's like, no one's willing to do it. And I thought this was really good. Now, I criticized gender roles in Lord of the Rings earlier, but he's like, I can't go, and Éomer can't go, but one of the other people are like, well, we still want someone from your house to protect us while you're gone. And he's like, there is no one else. And they're like, what about Éowyn? So Éowyn is Theoden's niece. Éomer's his nephew. His son was actually killed. Theodred was his son. Was killed by Saruman's troops just before the events of this book. In the movies, it's sort of a big deal. In the books, it's doesn't like I said, the emotionality's taken out of it. It's not like, oh no, my son is dead. He just sort of accepts it and goes on with it. Anyways, this Éowyn is a woman, but as soon as it's mentioned that, hey, she should stay and protect us, he's like, oh, well, yeah, of course she should. Can you do that, Éowyn? She's like, yeah, sure. So Éowyn's a fascinating character. And so even though she's a woman in this world where there are barely any women characters, she takes on sort of the role of a man. I mean, gender roles in Middle-earth are what they are. We can't criticize them. Well, we can. But anyways, so Éowyn's going to stay with the women and children and the old, and the men are going to go off to fight. So they go off to Isengard, but before they get there, they find a whole bunch of men fleeing back, and sort of the battle has been lost before they made it. And so they all divert to Helm's Deep, this ancient fortress that they're like, we can hold out there, and that's where we'll make our stand. So we have the Battle of Helm's Deep, which is really, really cool. See, in the films, it's one of my favorite parts of the whole series. The second film, The Two Towers, is my absolute favorite. So when they're getting into Helm's Deep, Gandalf actually leaves them, and he's like, oh, actually, I've got to go. I'll catch up with you later. And a lot of them are like, oh, he's just fleeing because he knows it's hopeless, blah, blah, blah. But as the battle's sort of getting more and more intense, Theoden says, like, as a last-ditch effort, everyone mount up, Éomer, Aragorn, and everyone, we're going to just ride out and fight our way out. So they try that, and as they do that, they see on a nearby hillside Gandalf show up with a whole bunch of men that he had sort of gathered from nearby from the last battle, that people had sort of scattered and fled everywhere. Gandalf's been like rounding them all up and brings them down for a final push, and they manage to defeat most of the orcs. The orcs are fleeing, and they are confronted with a new forest suddenly in front of them. And that forest hadn't been there before. Turns out it's Fangorn. So not just the Ents, but there's these things called Huorns. horns. I'm not sure how to say it. But they're Ents that sort of have become more tree-like, but I guess they're still technically Ents. So they look like a forest, but they're marching to Isengard, and all these orcs that are trying to flee from this battle at Helm's Deep get killed by them. So then they sort of round everyone up, and Gandalf says, look, we got to go to Isengard. I think things are happening there. I mean, look at this forest, what's going on. They finally get to Isengard, and they find it's been flooded, and there are no orcs. The gates have been ripped off, and sort of the Ents have taken over. The Ents have defeated Isengard. And of course, who do they come across sitting waiting for them at the gate but Merry and Pippin, eating and drinking and smoking and just like relaxing, sitting on a field of victory, enjoying their spoils. And they tell of how Treebeard has sort of locked Sauron in his tower and how they've sort of defeated Isengard. So that's all well and good. Then we have a meeting where all of these people go up to the tower, and from a balcony, Saruman talks to them, and he tries to like use his voice to corrupt and influence them, but King Theoden, he's having none of it. He's been used and abused by Saruman. He's not taking it anymore. And so they leave, but as they're leaving, Grima, who is in the tower with Saruman, tries to throw something at Gandalf, but he misses. Turns out the thing he threw is this Palantir, this one of the 7 seeing stones of the men of the west, of Numenor, of Gondor. These glass globes, like orbs that you would ponder, and that had been how Saruman had been in contact with Sauron in Mordor, and that's sort of how he had been corrupted. So Grima unknowingly threw out this super important thing, which Gandalf then grabs and sort of hides. But of course, Pippin, being a Took, he has to look into it. And so he does look into it and sort of confronts Sauron, or Sauron confronts him. And Sauron just thinks he's a servant of Saruman, and so nothing really bad happens, but it could have went poorly. They get lucky. And that's how the first part ends, with Theoden calling for all the Rohirrim to be raised in Edoras. He's going to go back to Edoras, get all of the troops he can, and then rush to Gondor, because they're at war now. They managed to defeat Saruman in the west, but they need to go east now because Mordor is going to attack. Which again, different from the films where it's much more Rohan stands alone and they only go when Gondor calls for aid, and in this they're like, no, we're going to war. Like, get the boys, we're heading off. So then we have book 4 following Sam and Frodo as they travel east. They pass through the Emyn Muil, this sort of rocky, hilly land, manage to get through, and that's when they encounter Gollum. So Gollum has been following them this whole time, obviously with ulterior motives and wanting to kill them and take the ring back. But they manage to trap Gollum and get him to swear on the ring that he will guide them and do them no harm, or specifically do Frodo no harm, or even more specifically, the Master of the Ring no harm. Anyway, so he leads them through these dead marshes, this sort of boggy, swampy mess of craters filled with water that have these dead bodies in it from this battle thousands of years previous, which to me is very much like, remember Tolkien fought in the First World War. This is very much Battle of the Somme, cratered no man's land. And there's even a land just after the swamp that they get through that is literally called no man's land. So I'm seeing sort of the World War I influence in this part of the book. They managed to get through. It's revealed that there are these things called Nazgul, which are the ring wraiths, the black riders from the previous book, that they had their horses destroyed. Now they're on these sort of winged creatures, described as sort of carrion birds. But what are they? Doesn't really matter. They can fly now. But they get through the dead marshes, and they get through the no man's land, and they make it to the Black Gate, the gates of Mordor. And it's like, how are they going to get in? You can't just walk. One does not simply walk into Mordor. Just not a line in the books. Frodo's like, well, we got to do it. But then Gollum, he tells them, no, there is another way. Please let me take you this other way. And they're like, okay, if you know a secret way in, fine, we'll go that way. So they head back down south, and they enter this sort of forested, sort of nice area that's not like blasted and evil, Ithilien, which had been a province of Gondor on the east side of the Anduin River, but has been sort of lost to Gondor for years now and is sort of enemy territory. Sam, while trying to cook some rabbits that Gollum caught for him, accidentally makes a fire that causes some smoke, and so they get caught. Who do they get caught by? Fortunately, it is some men from Gondor who are over there sort of in secret, these rangers. One of them being Faramir, the brother of Boromir. And Faramir's a great guy. Faramir is much more Aragorn-like than Boromir. Boromir is very sort of reckless and rash and aggressive, whereas Faramir is sort of more calculated, he's more wise, he's more described as being bookish, but he's still like a great warrior. And he manages to sort of eventually get everything out of Frodo and Sam that, they knew Boromir. They have this ring that they're trying to get into Mordor, and Faramir sort of recognizes the lure of such a thing, and how he can see how Boromir would want it, but he's like, no, I can't do that. I'm not going to take it. I'm going to let you go on your way. And he also reveals how he sort of knows that Boromir has died because they find his horn, the horn of Gondor, cloven in two, washed up in the river. But also Faramir had a dream where he saw this boat come up to the shore that had Boromir's body in it. It's interesting. There's a lot of dreams in this series. The first book as well, I didn't mention it as much, but the whole reason that Boromir went up to Rivendell for counsel was he had this dream of this verse about Isildur's Bane, the halfling, and whatnot. And Frodo in the Fellowship of the Ring has lots of sort of visions, you could say, these dreams or prophecies. He sees Gandalf sort of riding an eagle off of Orthanc, and there's a lot of sort of fate or destiny or higher powers or supernatural things or beings sort of very much in the background of this series that are never ever explicitly mentioned or even referenced, but there are sort of things in this world that are making sure things like Frodo was meant to find the ring. What do you mean he was meant to find it? Like fate and weird turns of luck and stuff like that, including these dreams. Anyway, so Faramir lets them go. I mean, he catches Gollum and threatens to kill Gollum, but Frodo speaks up for Gollum and eventually leaves them after finding out that they're taking the path of Cirith Ungol into Mordor. And he's like, well, that sounds like a bad idea, but sure, you know what? You're on your mission. You do that. So the trio, Sam, Frodo, and Gollum, climb up the stairs past Minas Morgul. At the same time, the sort of army is unleashed from Minas Morgul, from this second tower that they've made it to. And he's the sort of captain of the Nazgul, the head of the Black Riders, the Witch King of Angmar, this super evil dude is leading his army out against Gondor. But Frodo, Sam, and Gollum, they manage to sneak past. They climb up the stairs and into this deep tunnel where they meet the evil being Shelob, which sort of has the form of a spider, but it's not like an actual spider. It's like this evil creature that is in the form of a spider. And man, this part was great. Like, this is when you see Sam at his best so far. I mean, I'm sure we'll see more of Sam in the next book. But they use the light of Erendil, this sort of file of Galadriel that has this light of the star, the Silmaril inside of it, to sort of fight back against Shelob, and they manage to get out. But as they get out, Shelob chases after Frodo, and Sam gets attacked by Gollum. Sam manages to fight off Gollum, and then when he runs back to Frodo and sort of manages to cut off one of Shelob's claws and stabs her in one of her eyes, and then she pounces on him, and he holds up his sword, and she impales herself on his sword, or I guess on Frodo's sword. It's Sting, the sword that he got way back when. Sam has this epic fight with Shelob, chases her away, and then he finds Frodo seemingly dead, wrapped up in these webs, but totally unresponsive. And the book does a good job, I think, of making it actually seem like he's actually dead. And Sam, he's weeping. He's like, what do I do? But he's like, I'm the last member of the Fellowship of the Ring. I have to continue on. He eventually decides he'll take Frodo's sword and take the Phial of Galadriel, and he has to take the ring and continue on. And so he does, and he leaves the body of Frodo behind. And as soon as he does that, a whole bunch of orcs appear, and Sam manages to slip the ring on, becomes invisible. And because he has the ring on, he can sort of understand the language of these orcs. And they grab Frodo and take him away. And Sam, he's like, why did I leave the body of Frodo? Now who knows what they're going to do to this body? And the orcs reveal that this Frodo's not dead. He's just been sort of paralyzed or temporarily paralyzed by the venom of Shelob, and that he'll eventually come to and be totally fine. But of course now he's captured by orcs of Mordor, and Sam is distraught. He's like, what did I do? Why did they take the ring? Why did they leave Frodo? And that's how the book ends. Suspenseful. So yeah, I do like, now that the narrative has split, and then it split again with Aragorn and with Merry and Pippin, and then rejoined again. The way it's sort of laid out, the chronology of it is really, really well done to sort of build suspense and then sort of have exposition and then back to the original storyline. It's really, really cool. So Two Towers, my favorite of the movies. We'll see if it's my favorite of the books. Next, we have to read Part 3, Return of the King.